Managing control layout. Alright, so in this video, again, we're going to keep our focus on the user interface here. What we're really going to accomplish is learning how to organize our user interface into manageable subunits. And we're going to do this by using what are called container controls. And container controls are controls that host other controls. And again, this is going to have two effects. Actually, number one, as I mentioned, it's going to allow us to create an organized user interface, which will, of course, allow the user to visually see how the application should flow and how the data should flow through our application. Not only that, but it's going to help us as programmers learn how to manage this user interface and the controls within these container controls in code. It's much easier to manage controls that are, if you need to hide a section of controls, it's much easier to hide an entire section than to go in and hide, all these specific controls. And the same thing comes when you need to disable or re-enable these controls and such. So that's what we're going to focus on in this video, is managing control layout, both us in code and also to create a user-friendly interface. So let's jump in the outline here and take a deeper look at what we're going to be covering. We're going to start with an overview of container controls. And really what we're going to focus on here is what I just talked about. Just talk a little bit about what container controls are used for, and I'll also go over all the different container controls in the .NET 2.0 framework. We'll cover every single one of them because they all have their uses for different scenarios. And then we'll jump into a demo here, and I'll teach you how to use all the different container controls in the .NET 2.0 framework. Again, they all have their place, so that's why I want to show you all of them. And then at the end here, we'll take a look at how to work with container controls. And this is going to really focus on how to do things like dynamically add controls in code at runtime to a container control. Also, how to work with what's called the control collection of a container control. How we can create very efficient code by looping through all of the controls within a specific container and doing things on them, maybe disabling, enabling them, things of that nature. Alright, so let's start off here with an overview of container controls and just talk a little bit about what container controls are used for. Again, I mentioned most of them already. It allows us to group controls into subunits and help maintain our information flow across our user interface. That's important. Of course, we want to make the application and the user interface as easy as possible to use for our users, and this is really just the start of doing so. Also gives our forms logical and physical boundaries. Again, one of those visual assistance kind of things there for the user. Also, child controls inherent parent properties unless specifically overridden. And this is the case for pretty much things in Windows and folders. Same thing with user interfaces and container controls. For instance, we talked about this in a previous video. The form itself is the host to everything, so everything automatically inherits the form unless specifically overridden. Same with container controls. If we drag a group box onto a form, then all of the child controls are going to really inherit some of the common properties between those two controls. So same thing happens here with container controls as happens with the form. We also have a control collection, as I mentioned here, that we can use to access the child controls. And I'll show you how to use that because that is, again, a great way, and an easy way, and an efficient way to write code to access these child controls. And we also have, here's a list of our container controls. As I mentioned here, we have the group box, which is just a very simple way to group controls. It has a little border around it, and I'll show you here in a second. But it's also just a great way to do things such as radio buttons. If you have, many radio buttons that you need to host on a form, well, a group box is a great way to group them together. So in that way, they'll be mutually exclusive within that group box. We also have the panel control. The panel control is pretty much the exact same thing as a group box, except that by default it doesn't have a border on it. Another thing is that this is actually a scrollable control, meaning you can scroll within it. The flow layout panel is a brand new control here in the .NET 2.0 framework, and it's really nice because it pretty much manages the layout of the controls. We just really have to tell it where to break within the control and a couple other things. I'm going to show you a good demo on this, but this is a brand new control that a lot of people have been asking about because it's a different way of thinking about how to manage your control layouts, and specifically it does most of that work for you, laying out the controls in a nice consistent manner on the form. So once you get the hang of these controls, they're actually really handy, and they'll save you time because now you don't have to manage how controls are positioned on a form automatically. You can let the flow layout container, do it for us. The table layout panel is very similar to the flow layout panel in that it manages the controls within it. The difference here is this allows for much more complex layouts because just as an HTML table or a table you can build in Word or Excel, anything like that, pretty much the same thing. We can build this table dynamically or statically, and then the controls that we place within it, either dynamically or statically, will automatically flow within the cells within, of course, the rows and columns of the table layout. So we'll take a good look at how to use this control as well. And then we have the tab control, one of my personal favorites, because this is just a great all-around control for managing and creating a lot of space on one form. If you need to do a lot in one form, the tab control is a great way to do it, because really what you get, if say you have 5 tabs on the tab control, now you really have 5 forms within one. So it's just a wonderful control. Again, one of my favorites here. We'll take a good look at how to use it. And we also have the split container control, which is a nice way to create kind of a moving user interface. So users can size within a form. They can size, right down the middle, split it and size different controls depending on what side of the container they're on. So we'll take a good look at how to use all of these container controls in a demo. Before we do that, though, I just want to give you just a quick idea of what a couple of these look like here. Specifically here, the group box and the tab control, because they're all over in Windows. Even if you just right-click on the taskbar and go to Properties down here, right off the bat here, see this is a tab control, just to give you an idea. And you can see here's a group box right here, right on the first form here, and this just groups these controls together. Same with the Start menu. We kind of have the Start menu tab here. We have just a standard radio button selection here, and then we have a little privacy. So you can see these are just, the group box is probably the most popular container control out there just because it's simple and it's a great, easy way to group controls that are like. Here's on the notification area, we have 2 group boxes, one with just a general icon settings and one with our system icon settings down for the system tray here. And that's pretty much it. So that's what I just wanted to briefly show you here, is that the group box, definitely the most common. And you'll also see the tab control all over too, because it is, again, such a great control that we can use to split up our user interface on one form and turn it into many user interfaces. Alright, how about we get familiar with some container controls here by opening up a demo and just generally working with these controls inside of Visual Studio 2005. So let's get out of the whiteboard here and head on down to the Start button up to Programs. We'll open up Visual Studio here by going through the menu system and firing up the integrated development environment here. And when we're in it, you can see I have a project created here called 70-526_03 control layout. So we'll work with container controls. And the first thing I want to do before even getting into these container controls is talk about a few common properties that all of these container controls share. And really what I'm talking about here is scaling controls on a sizable form. And what does that mean? Well, all container controls, be it a host, be it the actual form, of course, the host of all the controls, or a container control that hosts other controls, this property that we have to work with here are anchor and dock. And you'll actually see that every single control has this anchor and dock property. And what we do here is basically, this allows for scaling. And again, scaling is just when we size a form, how do the controls within that form respond? Do they stay where they are? Do they size with the form? And do they scale with the form? So that's what the 2 properties that I'm going to show you here. And if I click on the Close button, just to show you here, if we scroll to the top, we have the anchor property and we have the dock property. These are the 2 that we're going to be really most concerned with when it comes to sizing and scaling our forms. And this is relevant because, of course, when you're working with container controls, that is what they're going to scale and dock and anchor to, are the actual container controls themselves. Alright, so we have a form here, right? And just to show you how the group box control works, again, this is the simplest of the container controls, and it's really meant for just grouping controls that work off each other. In this case, we have a text box and a search button, right? And these go together because when you click on the search button, it's going to work on data that's within this text box control. So this is a great kind of instance here where you'd want to use a group box control to give the visual representation that, hey, these controls work together. And just to give you an idea here of this anchoring and docking, by default, all of the controls are anchored top left. And what that means is that they will always maintain the same distance from, in this case, the top and left borders of the form. So if we resize this form right now, the Close button is going to stay exactly where it is relative to the top and the left. And same with the group box control, same with the text box control and the search button. The difference here is these, since they are inside of a container control, are going to maintain that relation to the group box control rather than the form like the group box and the Close button is. So I have this not set up for anchoring and docking quite yet. This is all just defaulted, so if I run it now, which I'm going to do here and show you that this isn't going to scale the way we want it to. I'll show you exactly how we want to do it. Now, one thing I want to mention here, when we click the Run button, if you have multiple forms in your project, you just want to ensure that the form that you're thinking is going to fire up is actually going to start when you start the project here. And to do that, you can just double click on the My Project tab, or node I should say, within our solution. And on the Application tab, just ensure that your startup form is the form that you'd like. Since we have 3 forms in here, just wanted to make sure here that we have the scaling form as our startup form, and we're good to go. So we'll save that. We'll close out of our properties here, and let's go ahead and just click the Run button. And first here we're dealing with anchoring, just to clarify that there. And you can see here, if I size this, you can see the controls are staying exactly where they put, because that's the default. They are maintaining the distance between the, in this case, top and left edge of the form. So what if we want to make that a little bit more intuitive here? Say we want our close button always to stay down here in the lower right hand corner of the form, so when we size it, or the user sizes it, that close button will stay down there. And also we want the group box to control to maintain its distance on the left, the top, and the right, so it'll also size with it dynamically. And then not only that, but we also have to work with our controls within here. But let's keep this simple to start with. Let's work with the close button. And if we go up to the anchor property, you can see if we drop this down, this will give us a little visual of currently where we're docked, or where we're anchored to. And you can see by default top left. We really want this to be right bottom. So we're going to go ahead and choose the right and the bottom, and we're going to unchoose the top and the left. So now our close button, sorry about that, our close button is anchored on the lower right hand corner of our form. And now if we click on the group box control, let's do the same thing. Let's go up to the anchor, and the only thing we want to do here is just add it to the right. So now our group box should hang in there on the right. Now, let's see how that looks so far. I'm going to go ahead and hit the Run button here. And let's go ahead and resize our form, and look at that. So far, so good. Our close button is staying great down there on the lower right hand side, and our group box is doing what we want it to as well. The only difference here is, of course, we need to work with our search button and our text box control, because we will also want these to work in unison with the group box to size properly. Now let's work with the controls within our group box here. Now let's start with the search button. We will always want the search button to maintain its distance within the group box control on the right hand side. So we always want it to be to the right of the text box here. So if we click on our search button and scroll up to our anchor property, we're just going to flip this around here and make sure it's right top instead of left top, or top left. So we're going top right instead of top left. That means it will always stay on this side of the group box control. And for our text box, we actually always want this to maintain its distance from the left, but we also want it to maintain its distance from the search control. So really what we need to do here is do a left and right. Alright, and so now what we do, when we hit the Run button here, and size it, let's see, it'll size this way. Look at that. You can see that the text box is maintaining position from the search button, and the search button is maintaining its position on the right hand side, and they're both maintaining their position within the group box control itself. Now if I go down, however, you can see we're not really sizing. At this point we're just scaling. We're sizing, horizontally, but not vertically. So we can do that too, and this is all done through the anchor property here. See, we did want that to happen. The first thing we need to do is mess with our container control here. We need to take our group box control and ensure that it's also anchored to the bottom of the form. So now it'll maintain its position around the entire form, essentially. In the text box, we can do the same thing. We want our text box to also maintain its position from the top and the bottom. And then our search button here, since that's always going to stay on the right, we really just want to keep it on the bottom there. And there we go. Now, at first you're going to think this isn't going to work, but there's actually something with the text box that we need to do. As you can see here, oh no, it did work. It worked perfect. Look at that. Boom. And that's actually because I set the property prior. I didn't unset the property. Sorry about that. There's actually a property on here called multi-line. See this? If it's not a multi-line text box, it won't do that. And just to show you again here, if I turn it off. So this is a single line text box. So no matter what you do with the single line text box, it's going to stay single line. If you want it to do that sizing and such, then you need to make it a multi-line text box. So go back up, click on the text box, hit the multi-line property and turn it to true. Now it can be multiple lines, as the property suggests. So if we hit run and do that again, now everything is sizing dynamically with the form. So that's all done via the anchor property. The anchor is really going to where you're going to determine your sizing and your scaling, and it's a very handy property to get familiar with, because if the more you understand about anchoring and just get the hang of it, you'll have some really nice dynamic forms, and people love it when they can make forms the size they really want it to rather than be locked into a specific size. Now the docking control, I just want to mention it here and show you. It's pretty simple. It's really just a specific border of the control is going to be tied to the actual container itself. So in this case, look at the close button here. If we drop down the dock property and choose the bottom, See that? It docks to the entire bottom of the form. So now it'll actually scale in size dynamically based on the form. So that's kind of a nice property, and it can work hand in hand with anchoring. But a real good use for this comes into play is when we get into using the split container. And we'll talk about that a little bit ago.